The blizzard hit Boston like a fist wrapped in ice. James Mitchell stood at the bus stop on Boylston Street, collar turned up against the wind that screamed between buildings and sent snow spinning in vicious spirals. His cheap coat, bought 3 years ago at a clearance sale he'd rather forget, did almost nothing against the cold that knifed through the fabric and settled deep in his bones. Around him the city had gone ghost town, empty. Smart people were home. Safe people were warm. James was neither. He checked his phone for the 4th time in as many minutes. The bus tracker app showed a red exclamation point and a message that made his stomach drop. Route 39 suspended due to weather conditions. He refreshed it twice as if the pixels might rearrange themselves into something more forgiving. They didn't. The office building rose 32 floors into the storm behind him, all glass and steel, and the kind of architectural arrogance that said money without needing to whisper. Most of the windows were black. The cleaning crews had long since packed up and gone home. But on the 32nd floor, the executive level, the floor James had only visited twice in 4 years, and both times felt like a peasant summoned to court, a single light burned behind floor-to-ceiling windows. James stopped walking. It was the corner office. Victoria Cross's name was whispered in the break rooms with the kind of reverence people usually reserved for natural disasters. She was the CEO of Cross Analytics, a woman who'd inherited her father's company at 30 and turned it into something twice as ruthless and 3 times as profitable. He should have kept walking. He should have put his head down and pushed through the snow and made it home before hypothermia became a real concern. But something about that single point of light burning alone while the rest of the city went dark stopped him cold. Before he could talk himself out of it, James turned toward the building. The lobby was unlocked, which surprised him. The night security guard, a man in his 60s who always had a thermos of coffee and a paperback mystery, looked up from his desk with the kind of slow blink that said James was the last person he expected to see. The guard's nameplate read Davies, but everyone called him Billy. He'd worked the overnight shift for 30 years, a widower who preferred the quiet hours when the building belonged to ghosts and ambition rather than the chaos of daylight. Billy set down his book. "Mitchell, hell you doing here at 3 in the morning? Forgot something. Won't take long." Billy studied him for a beat, then shrugged. "Elevator's running. Don't make me come get you." "Wouldn't dream of it." The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt longer than it should have. James stared at his reflection in the polished steel doors. Tired eyes, 2-day stubble, a shirt that had been wrinkled since noon. He looked like exactly what he was, a mid-level analyst who'd been treading water for years, too scared to drown and too exhausted to swim. The doors opened with a soft chime. The executive floor was silent, the kind of silence that felt expensive. Thick carpet muffled his footsteps as he walked past darkened offices with nameplates that read like a Forbes list. Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Executive Vice President of Strategic Development. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and something else. Power, maybe. Or just money. Victoria Cross's office was at the end of the hall. James could see her through the glass walls before she saw him. She was sitting at her desk, a massive slab of dark wood that probably cost more than his car. But she wasn't working. Her laptop was closed. The papers that usually covered every inch of surface space were pushed aside in a messy heap. And Victoria Cross, the woman who'd once reduced a senior director to tears over a missed decimal point, was crying. Not the polite, controlled kind of crying that people do in bathroom stalls when they think no one's listening. This was raw. Messy. Human. Her shoulders shook. Her hands covered her face. Her perfectly styled hair, always smooth, always intimidating, was falling loose around her face in dark waves. James froze. This was private. This was something he wasn't supposed to see. He should turn around, get back in the elevator, pretend he'd never come up here in the first place. But then Victoria looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. For 3 seconds neither of them moved. James felt his heart kick hard against his ribs. Victoria's face went through a series of expressions so fast he almost missed them. Shock, embarrassment, anger. And then something that looked almost like relief. She stood, crossed the office in 4 long strides, opened the door. Up close, the illusion shattered completely. Her makeup was smudged. Her eyes were red and swollen. The perfectly tailored suit she always wore like armor was wrinkled at the elbows. She looked breakable. "James Mitchell." Her voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" He had no good answer. "I saw your light on." She stared at him. "And you came to check on me." "I don't know why I came." It was the most honest thing he'd said all week. Victoria's jaw tightened. She looked like she was going to tell him to leave, to forget what he'd seen, to never speak of this again. But instead, she stepped back and held the door open wider. "Come in, please." James stepped inside. The office was exactly as intimidating as he'd imagined. Wall-to-wall windows overlooking the city, modern art that probably cost 6 figures, shelves lined with awards and industry accolades. But tonight it felt different, smaller, somehow more human. Victoria closed the door and leaned against it. She didn't sit, didn't try to compose herself. She just stood there looking at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "You're going to ask what's wrong?" Not a question, a statement. "I wasn't planning to." That seemed to surprise her. "Why not?" James shrugged. "You'll tell me if you want to, or you won't. Either way, it's not my business." Victoria let out a breath that might have been a laugh if it hadn't sounded so broken. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd run." She pushed off the door and walked back to her desk. For a moment, James thought she was going to sit down and dismiss him. Instead, she turned and looked at him with an expression that made his stomach flip. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to say yes." James's instincts screamed danger. "What kind of something?" Victoria crossed her arms. It was a defensive posture, but on her it still looked commanding. "There's a wedding this morning. Family wedding. My cousin. It's the kind of event I can't miss. And I can't go alone. So bring a date." "I don't have one." "Then don't bring one." "It's not that simple." Victoria's voice went tight. "My ex-fiancé will be there. My mother will be there. And if I walk in alone, it will confirm everything they already think about me. That I'm cold, incapable of connection, married to my work and nothing else." She paused, measuring him. "I need someone to come with me. Someone who can play the part convincingly. Someone who won't ask questions or expect anything afterward." James stared at her. "You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend?" "Yes." "You're serious?" "Completely." "Why me?" Victoria met his eyes. "Because you're stable, respectable. You have a daughter, which makes you seem grounded. You don't gossip. You won't leverage this for career advancement. And—" she hesitated. "And you just walked into a storm to check on someone you barely know. That says something." James's head was spinning. This was insane. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not real life. Not to people like him. "What if I say no?" "Then I go alone." Victoria said it quietly. "And I survive it. I always do." There was something in the way she said it, "I always do," that hit him harder than it should have. It wasn't confidence. It was resignation. The voice of someone who'd been surviving for so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to actually live. James thought about Lily, about the mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, about the fact that his direct supervisor reported to someone who reported to someone who reported to Victoria Cross, and saying no to the CEO. Even in a situation this bizarre felt like signing his own professional death warrant. But that wasn't why he was going to say yes. He was going to say yes because he recognized that look in her eyes. He'd seen it in the mirror for months after Anna died. The exhaustion of holding yourself together when all you wanted to do was fall apart. "One condition." James heard himself say the words before he'd fully decided. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating—" "You tell me the truth afterward. About why this matters so much. About what you're really afraid of." She went very still. For a moment he thought she'd take it back, tell him to leave, to forget the whole thing. But then she nodded once, sharp and final. "Deal." "Then yes, I'll do it." Victoria's shoulders dropped an inch, like a weight had lifted. "Thank you." She glanced at her watch. "The wedding starts at 7. We need to leave by 5:30. I'll have a suit sent to—" She stopped. "You don't live close, and the buses aren't running. I can— You'll stay here." It wasn't a question. Victoria walked to a door James hadn't noticed before and opened it to reveal a small room with a leather couch, a private bathroom, and a closet. "I keep a spare suit on hand. It'll fit well enough. Get some rest. I'll wake you at 5. James looked at the couch, then back at her. "Where will you be?" "Working." Victoria's voice carried something final. "I can't sleep. I haven't been able to sleep in weeks. So I work. It's what I'm good at." She turned away before he could respond. 5 a.m. "James, don't be late." The door closed between them. James stood there for a long moment, feeling like he'd just agreed to something far more dangerous than a fake date. Then he stepped into the small room, closed the door, and lay down on the couch that was somehow more comfortable than his own bed. Through the door he could hear the faint sound of Victoria typing. He didn't sleep. At 4:58 a.m. the door opened. James sat up disoriented. For a second he forgot where he was. Forgot about the storm, the wedding, the deal he'd made. Then Victoria stepped into the room, and it all came rushing back. She'd changed. The wrinkled suit was gone, replaced by a sleek black dress that probably cost more than he made in 3 months. Her hair was pulled back in a style that looked effortless but definitely wasn't. Her makeup was flawless. The crying woman from 3 hours ago had vanished, completely replaced by the CEO everyone feared. "You're awake." Hard to sleep when your brain's screaming at you that you've made a terrible decision. Victoria's mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. "The suit's hanging in the closet. Shower if you need to. We leave in 45 minutes. She turned to go, but James stopped her. "Victoria." She looked back. "Are you okay?" It was a simple question. The kind people asked 100 times a day without meaning it. But James meant it, and Victoria seemed to know that because her expression shifted just for a second into something softer. "Ask me again after tonight." Then she was gone. James found the suit hanging exactly where she'd said. It was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a white shirt and a dark tie that looked like it cost more than his entire wardrobe. He showered in the marble bathroom, shaved with a razor he found in a drawer, and put on the suit that fit him like it had been made for his body. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The exhausted analyst was gone. In his place stood someone who looked like he belonged at a high society wedding, like he could stand next to Victoria Cross and not look like an imposter. Fake it till you make it, he thought. Story of my life. He stepped out of the room at 5:42 a.m. Victoria was waiting by the elevator wearing a long coat over her dress. She looked him up and down, and something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe? Or approval? "You clean up well. You sound shocked. I'm rarely wrong about people, but I might have underestimated you." She pressed the elevator button. "We need to get our stories straight before we arrive. How we met. How long we've been together. Why we kept it quiet." The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside. "How long have we been dating?" 3 months. Victoria said it without hesitation. "Long enough to be serious. Short enough that it's not strange they haven't met you yet." "How did we meet?" "You stayed late one night to finish a report. I was working late as always. We started talking." She glanced at him. "The truth is easier to remember than a lie. Keep it simple." "Why did we keep it secret?" "Office policy, power dynamics. We wanted to make sure it was real before going public." Victoria's voice was clinical, like she was presenting a business proposal. "You're a widower. You have an 8-year-old daughter named Lily. You're cautious about introducing new people into her life, which is why I haven't met her yet." James's chest tightened. "You did your homework." "I always do." The elevator reached the ground floor. Billy looked up from his desk, nodding as they passed. Outside, the snow had eased from blizzard to steady fall, but the city was still buried under a foot of white. The streets were empty except for a handful of plows working through the night, and there, parked at the curb like something out of a dream, was a black Mercedes with tinted windows. A driver stepped out and opened the back door. Victoria slid in without a word. James followed, sinking into leather seats that were heated and smelled faintly of expensive perfume. The door closed, sealing them into a quiet cocoon of warmth. The driver pulled away from the curb. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. James watched the city slide past the window, shuttered shops, empty intersections, a world on pause. Beside him, Victoria sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing controlled. "Tell me about your family," James said it finally, breaking the silence. Victoria didn't look at him. "What do you want to know?" "Start with your mother." "Catherine Cross. She married my father when she was 22, spent 30 years as the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinners, managing his image, making sure everything looked flawless from the outside." Victoria's voice went flat. "When he died, she expected me to step into his role and her role. Run the company, but also get married, have children, be the daughter she'd groomed me to be." She paused. "I chose the company. And she hasn't forgiven you. She thinks I'm broken, incapable of love, too much like my father and not enough like her." Victoria's fingers tightened slightly. "She might be right. You don't believe that." "Don't I?" Victoria finally looked at him. "I work 16-hour days. I can't remember the last time I had dinner with someone who wasn't a client or a board member. I look at couples and feel nothing but—" She stopped. "It doesn't matter." "It does." James said it quietly. "Or you wouldn't have asked me to do this." Victoria turned away, staring out at the snow. "My ex-fiancé will be there too. Derek Ashford." "What about him?" "He's my cousin's best friend. I can't avoid him." She was quiet for a moment. "We were engaged for 8 months. He proposed at a charity gala in front of 300 people. I said yes because it made sense. He came from the right family, understood the business world, looked perfect on paper. But perfect on paper isn't the same as real." "No." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "He wanted me to step back, not give up the company entirely, but delegate more, work less, focus on building a life with him. He said I was married to my job, and he was tired of being the mistress." "What happened?" "I told him the job was there first." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "He left 3 weeks later. Do you regret it?" She was quiet for a long time. "I regret that I didn't feel anything when he left. No heartbreak, no relief. Just nothing. Like I'd lost a business partner, not a fiancé." She looked at him. "That's what scares my mother. That's what Derek will use against me tonight. The proof that I'm exactly what they think I am. Cold, unfeeling, incapable of putting another person first." "You're here," James pointed out, "asking for help. That's not nothing. I'm asking for a performance, not connection. Are you—" James shifted to face her. "From where I'm sitting, you could have hired an actor, paid someone to play the part and disappear afterward. But you asked me. Someone who works for you. Someone who will still be there on Monday morning. That's not risk-free, Victoria." She stared at him like he'd said something in a language she didn't speak. "I don't know what I'm doing," Victoria admitted, and her voice cracked just slightly. "I don't know why I asked you. I don't know what I'm hoping will happen tonight. I just know I can't walk into that room alone. Not again. Not with all of them watching, waiting for me to prove them right." James reached out and took her hand. It was an impulse, something he did without thinking. Her fingers were cold, her grip uncertain. For a second he thought she'd pull away, but then her hand tightened around his, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. "You're not alone," he said it simply. Victoria's eyes glistened. "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I don't." The car slowed, then stopped. Through the window, James could see the Fairmont Hotel rising like a palace made of glass and gold. Valets in formal uniform stood under heated awnings. Luxury cars lined the circular drive, each one worth more than James's annual salary. People in furs and diamonds moved through the snow like it was a minor inconvenience, not a natural disaster. This was a different world. A world James didn't belong to. Victoria's hand slipped out of his. "Last chance to run." James looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman behind the armor, the fear behind the control, the loneliness behind the power. "I'm not running." The driver opened the door and together they stepped out into the storm. Heat hit first. Outdoor heaters blasting warmth across the entrance, turning the snow into a curtain of steam. A doorman in white gloves welcomed them with a practiced smile. Inside the lobby was all marble columns and crystal chandeliers, the kind of space designed to make you feel small. Victoria didn't look small. She walked like she owned the building, her chin up, her stride confident. James stayed close, matching her pace. A few heads turned as they crossed the lobby. Recognition flickered across expensive faces. Victoria ignored them all. They reached the ballroom doors. Victoria stopped, turned to him. "Ready?" "No," James said honestly. "But let's do it anyway." Her mouth curved. "Good answer." She took his arm. The doors opened and James stepped into a world he'd only ever seen in magazines. A ballroom that seemed to stretch forever. Round tables draped in white silk. Centerpieces that looked like ice sculptures come to life. And at least 200 people in formal wear who all turned to look when Victoria Cross walked in with a man nobody recognized on her arm. The whispers started immediately. James felt their eyes like physical weight. He caught fragments of conversation. "Who is that? Where did she find him? How long has this been going on?" But Victoria didn't slow down. She moved through the crowd with the kind of grace that came from years of practice, nodding at acquaintances, accepting air kisses from people whose smiles didn't reach their eyes. And then a voice cut through the noise. "Victoria." A woman in a champagne-colored gown stood near the head table, her posture perfect, her expression carved from ice. She was older, 60 maybe, but age had only sharpened her edges. Her jewelry caught the light like small suns. Her gaze could have stripped paint. Catherine Cross, Victoria's mother. "Mother," Victoria's voice was even. "You look beautiful. You're late. The storm is an excuse, not a reason." Catherine's eyes shifted to James and he felt himself being assessed and dismissed in the span of a heartbeat. "And who is this?" Victoria's hand tightened on James's arm. "This is James Mitchell, my boyfriend." The word hung in the air like a grenade. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. "Boyfriend." She repeated the word slowly. "How unexpected." "We've been seeing each other for 3 months." Victoria continued, her voice steady. "I wanted to wait until it was serious before introducing him to the family." 3 months. Catherine's smile was razor thin. "And this is the first I'm hearing of it. How modern of you, Victoria, to keep such things private." James felt the subtext like a slap. Another secret, another way you've shut me out. He extended his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Cross." Catherine looked at his hand like it was something that had crawled out of the snow. Then with obvious reluctance, she took it. Her grip was limp, perfunctory. "Mitchell?" She said it like she was testing the weight of the name. "That's not a name I recognize. What do you do, Mr. Mitchell?" Here it was, the moment Victoria had warned him about. "I'm an analyst. I work at Cross Analytics." Catherine's eyebrows rose a fraction. "You work for my daughter." "With her," James corrected gently. "Not for her. At least not when we're off the clock." It was a small distinction, but Victoria's fingers relaxed slightly on his arm. Catherine's smile sharpened. "How convenient." "Mother," Victoria started. "I'm sure Mr. Mitchell is very competent." Catherine continued, her tone suggesting the exact opposite. "And I'm sure you've thought very carefully about the optics of dating an employee. After all, you've always been so concerned with appearances." The words landed like stones. Victoria's face remained perfectly composed, but James felt the tension radiating off her in waves. He stepped in before she could respond. "Actually, Victoria's the one who wanted to keep things quiet. I was ready to go public weeks ago, but she was concerned about how it might affect my position at the company. She didn't want anyone to think I was getting preferential treatment. It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but it shifted the narrative just enough." Catherine studied him with new interest. "How noble of you both." She turned to Victoria. "Derek is at the bar. You should say hello before the ceremony starts." Her gaze flicked back to James. "I'm sure Mr. Mitchell can entertain himself for a few minutes." It was a dismissal, a test. "Can he survive without you?" Victoria hesitated. James squeezed her hand gently, then let go. "Go. I'll be fine." She looked at him for a beat too long, then nodded and walked away. Catherine watched her go, then turned back to James with an expression that could have cut glass. "Let me be frank, Mr. Mitchell. I don't know what game you're playing, but I know my daughter. She doesn't date. She doesn't bring men to family events, and she certainly doesn't fall for anyone who works beneath her." Her voice dropped. "So, whatever arrangement you two have made, whatever leverage you think you've gained, I suggest you enjoy it while it lasts. Because Victoria always chooses the company. Always. And you, Mr. Mitchell, are not the company." James held her gaze. "You're right about one thing. Victoria does put the company first. But maybe that's because she spent her whole life believing that's all she's allowed to be, that wanting anything else makes her weak or broken." He paused. "I think you're wrong about her. And I think she's starting to realize you're wrong too." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "You're bolder than you look." "I'm honest. There's a difference." For a long moment they stood there. Two people from entirely different worlds, neither willing to back down. Then Catherine smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression James had seen all night. "We'll see. Won't we?" She turned and walked away, leaving James standing alone in a room full of strangers who were all pretending not to watch him. He exhaled slowly, his heart pounding. This was going to be a very long morning. James made his way to the bar, weaving through clusters of guests who spoke in the kind of hushed, performative tones that suggested every conversation was being recorded for posterity. He could feel eyes tracking him, not hostile exactly, but curious, assessing, trying to figure out where he fit in the carefully calibrated social hierarchy of a world he'd never been invited to join. The bartender, a young woman with impeccable posture and a smile that had been workshopped to perfection, greeted him with practiced warmth. "What can I get you, sir?" "Whiskey. Neat." "Any preference?" James glanced at the shelf behind her. Bottles he couldn't pronounce. Labels that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. "Dealer's choice." She poured something amber into a crystal tumbler and slid it across the polished wood. James took a sip and tried not to wince at the price tag he could taste in every drop. Smooth, expensive, the kind of thing people drank when they wanted you to know they had money. "First time at one of these?" The voice came from his left. A man about James's age, maybe a few years younger, with an easy smile and the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers. He wore his tuxedo like it was jeans and a t-shirt, comfortable in a way that suggested he'd been born into rooms like this. "That obvious?" The man laughed. "Only to people who know what to look for. I'm Derek Ashford." He extended his hand, the firm, confident grip that came with a lifetime of handshakes at charity galas and corporate fundraisers. James shook it, feeling something cold settle in his stomach. Derek Ashford, Victoria's ex-fiancé. "James Mitchell." "I know." Derek signaled the bartender for a drink of his own. "The whole room knows. My best friend's cousin is getting married, and Victoria Cross walking in with a mystery man. That's front-page news in this crowd." There was no edge to his voice, just genuine amusement. "You've officially become the most interesting person here, which I'm sure is exactly what you wanted." James found himself relaxing slightly. "I'll try to live up to the hype." Derek's drink arrived something clear with a twist of lime. He took a sip and studied James with the kind of casual assessment that felt different from Catherine's surgical dissection. "So, 3 months, huh? That's how long you two have been seeing each other." "That's the story." Derek's smile widened. "I like that. Honest. Most people would have just said yes." He leaned against the bar. "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me to mind my own business if you want." "Go ahead." "Is she happy?" The question caught James off guard. Not, "Are you using her?" Not, "What do you want from her?" Just, "Is she happy?" James thought about Victoria crying alone in her office at 3 in the morning, about the way her hand had trembled when she'd asked him to come tonight, about the armor she wore like a second skin. "I don't know. I don't think she knows either." Derek nodded slowly, like that was the answer he'd expected. "She doesn't let people in, not really. Even when we were together, she was always—" He paused, searching for the word. "Self-sufficient, like she didn't need anyone. My parents thought it was strength. I think it was just loneliness wrapped up in a prettier package." "You care about her." "She's impossible not to care about." Derek's voice softened. "Even when she's making it very clear she doesn't need you to." He looked at James. "So if you're here because you actually give a damn about her, not her money, not her position, just her, then I'm glad she brought you. But if you're here for any other reason, I suggest you leave before this gets messy. Fair warning. Don't thank me yet." Derek finished his drink. "Survive the ceremony first. Then we'll talk." He walked away, leaving James alone with his expensive whiskey and a growing sense that he'd stepped into something far more complicated than a fake date. The ceremony was beginning. Guests moved toward their seats, a sea of silk and diamonds flowing in choreographed precision. James scanned the room for Victoria and found her near the head table speaking with an older couple who looked like they'd stepped out of a portrait. She caught his eye and gave a small nod. "Time to go." James made his way through the crowd. Their table was near the front, close enough to the family that there was no escaping scrutiny. Victoria was already seated when James arrived, her posture perfect, her expression calm. But when he sat down beside her, she reached under the table and found his hand. Her fingers were ice cold. James squeezed gently, and she squeezed back once. Quick, like Morse code. "Thank you." The ceremony began with all the grandeur of a royal wedding. The bride, a young woman James didn't know and would never see again, floated down the aisle in a dress that probably required its own insurance policy. The groom waited at the altar with the kind of nervous joy that felt genuine, untouched by the cynicism that seemed to coat everything else in the room. James watched, but his attention kept drifting to Victoria. She sat perfectly still, her face a mask of polite interest. But James could feel the tension radiating off her in waves. The too tight grip on his hand, the way her breathing had gone shallow and controlled, the muscle jumping in her jaw every time the officiant said the word love. Halfway through the vows, James leaned close and whispered, "You okay?" "Fine." Her voice was barely audible. "You're a terrible liar." Her mouth twitched. "I'm an excellent liar. You're just paying attention." The ceremony ended with applause and the traditional kiss. Guests rose from their seats, conversation swelling back to its pre-ceremony volume. Victoria released James's hand and stood smoothing down her dress with movements that were just a fraction too precise. "I need air, just for a minute." "Now." "The reception doesn't start for another 20 minutes. I'll be back before anyone notices." She was already moving toward the terrace doors before James could respond. He followed because leaving her alone felt wrong, and because Derek's warning about things getting messy was still fresh in his mind. The terrace was a sprawling expanse of stone and decorative plants covered by a heated awning that kept the worst of the snow at bay. A handful of guests had gathered near portable heaters, smoking cigarettes and making the kind of small talk that sounded important but meant nothing. Victoria walked past them without a word, heading for the far corner where the awning ended and the night opened up. She stopped at the stone railing, gripping it with both hands, and stared out at the city. James came up beside her. "Talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about." "Victoria." "I'm fine, James." "You're not." She turned to look at him, and in the dim light she looked younger, more vulnerable. "I just needed a moment away from all of that. The wedding, the performance. Everyone in there is performing. The bride and groom performing happiness. My mother performing concern. The guests performing interest in a union they'll forget about by next week. It's exhausting." "Is that what we're doing? Performing?" Victoria's expression shifted. "Aren't we?" Before James could answer, a voice cut through the cold. Victoria Cross. Alone on a terrace at a family wedding. Some things never change. James turned to see Derek walking toward them with the kind of easy confidence that set every one of James's instincts on edge. Derek's smile was warm, but his eyes were calculating. "Derek." Victoria's voice went flat. "I didn't know you'd be here. Your best friend is getting married. Where else would I be?" Derek's gaze flicked to James. "And you brought company. How unexpected." He stepped closer. "James and I already met at the bar. He seems like a decent guy. Which makes me wonder what he's doing with you." The words were friendly on the surface, but the subtext was vicious. "I didn't think you were capable of attracting a decent man." James felt anger spike hot in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "I'm here because I want to be." "Are you—" Derek's attention returned to Victoria. "Because from where I'm standing this looks like another one of your arrangements, like everything else in your life, planned, controlled, performed." "That's enough." Derek ignored her. "Can I ask you something, James? What does dating Victoria Cross actually look like? Do you have a standing appointment Tuesday evenings from 7 to 9, romance block subject to cancellation if a client call runs long?" James stepped forward. "You need to walk away. Now." Derek's smile didn't falter. "I'm just curious, because in the 8 months we were engaged, I'm not sure Victoria and I had a single conversation that wasn't about logistics or optics or which charity gala we'd attend next, so I'm wondering what makes you different. That says more about you than it does about her." The air went sharp. Derek's smile finally cracked. "Careful, James. You've known her for 3 months. I knew her for 3 years. I know exactly who Victoria Cross is, and more importantly, I know who she isn't." "Then you don't know her at all." Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me guess. She's different with you. She opens up. She shares things she's never shared with anyone else. She makes you feel special, like you're the one person who finally understands her." He stepped closer. "That's the same story she told me, James. The same performance. And it lasted right up until the moment I asked her to actually prioritize something other than work." "Enough." Victoria's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "You don't get to do this, Derek. You don't get to show up here and tear me apart for whatever audience you're performing for." "I'm not performing." For the first time, Derek's mask slipped. Beneath the charm, James saw something raw. Hurt. "I'm telling the truth. The truth you never wanted to hear when we were together. You can't do this, Victoria. You can't have a real relationship. You're too afraid, too damaged, too—" "Stop." James's voice was quiet but absolute. He stepped between them, putting himself physically between Derek and Victoria. "You need to walk away now." Derek stared at him. "Or what?" "Or I'll make you. And we'll both regret it, but you'll regret it more." For a long moment nobody moved. The only sound was the wind howling against the awning and the distant murmur of the party inside. Then Derek's smile returned. Colder now. Sharper. "She'll break your heart. Just like she broke mine. And when she does, don't say I didn't warn you." He turned and walked back inside, leaving James and Victoria alone in the cold. Victoria didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood there, staring at the place where Derek had been, her breathing shallow and uneven. "Victoria, don't." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't ask if I'm okay. Don't tell me he's wrong. Just don't." James ignored her. He moved to stand in front of her, blocking her view of the ballroom, forcing her to look at him, instead of the ghost Derek had dragged out into the light. "Is he right about you? Are you incapable of this? Of connection? Of putting someone else first?" Lily's voice from that morning echoed in his head. "When will you stop being sad?" "Daddy." Victoria's eyes snapped to his. "What? Is he right about you? Are you incapable of this? Of connection? Of putting someone else first?" Her face crumpled. "I don't know." "Then let's find out." James took her hands. They were shaking. "Right here, right now. No performance, no armor. Just you and me and the truth. Why did you really ask me to come tonight?" I told you. The real reason, Victoria. She stared at him, her eyes filling with tears that she furiously tried to blink away. Because I'm tired. I'm so tired of being alone, of walking into rooms like this and having everyone look at me like I'm some kind of cautionary tale. The woman who chose her career over love. The ice queen who can't feel anything. I'm tired of proving I don't need anyone, James. Her voice broke. Because the truth is, I do need someone. I need someone to look at me and see more than the CEO, more than the quarterly earnings, more than the perfect polished version I show the world. I need someone to see me falling apart at 3 in the morning and not run, not fix me, just stay. Tears were streaming down her face now, cutting tracks through her perfect makeup. And I asked you because you're the only person who's looked at me in years and seen a human being instead of a brand. And I'm terrified that Derek's right, that I don't know how to do this, that I'll hurt you or push you away or... Stop. James squeezed her hands. Stop running the worst-case scenario. You want the truth. Here it is. I don't know if you're capable of a relationship. I don't know if I am either. I've been a ghost for 3 years, Victoria. I've been going through the motions, raising my daughter, showing up to work. But I haven't been alive. Not really. Not since my wife died. Victoria stared at him. Her name was Anna. We met in college, got married young, had Lily when we were 25. She was... He paused, remembering. She was light, you know, the kind of person who walked into a room and made it warmer just by being there. And then one night, black ice on Route 2, and she was gone. Just like that. No warning, no goodbye. His voice steadied. The first year was survival mode. Get Lily to school. Make dinner. Pay the bills. Don't think about the empty side of the bed. The second year was worse because the shock wore off and all I had left was the absence. People stopped asking how I was doing. They expected me to be okay, to move on, and I pretended I had because that's what you do. He met her eyes. But I wasn't okay. I was drowning. And the worst part was, I didn't even care. I just kept showing up, kept going through the motions, because that's what parents do. That's what responsible people do. And then tonight I saw you crying alone in that office. And for the first time in 3 years I felt something. Not attraction, not pity, just recognition. Like I was looking at someone who understood what it's like to be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. Victoria's tears fell faster now, but she didn't look away. So no, I don't know if you're capable of a relationship, but I know you're capable of being honest about how hard it is, and that's more than most people can say. He paused. Derek's wrong about you, Victoria. You're not broken. You're not incapable. You're just scared, and that's okay, because so am I. For a long moment they stood there in the cold, the snow falling around them like static. Then Victoria stepped forward and rested her forehead against his chest. James wrapped his arms around her. She didn't sob, didn't collapse. She just stood there breathing, letting herself be held. And James held her without trying to fix anything, without offering platitudes or promises. Just presence, just proximity. When she finally pulled back, her makeup was ruined and her hair was falling loose. She looked nothing like the polished CEO who'd walked into the ballroom an hour ago. She looked real. Thank you. Her voice was hoarse. For what? For staying. Before James could respond, the terrace door opened and a woman's voice called out, Victoria, they're starting the toasts. Victoria straightened, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. We should go back inside. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She looked at him. But I don't have to do it alone, right? Right. She took his hand and together they walked back toward the light and noise of the ballroom. Inside, the reception was in full swing. Dinner had been served. Plates of food so artfully arranged they looked like paintings. Champagne flowed. A string quartet played something classical in the corner. People laughed and talked and performed the rituals of wealth with practiced ease. Victoria and James made their way back to their table. The other seats were occupied now. Couples James didn't recognize making polite conversation about vacation homes and investment portfolios. One of the women, a blonde in a dress that probably cost more than James's car, leaned toward Victoria with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Evelyn, darling, it's been ages. How's the company?" Victoria's mask slipped back into place. "Thriving. We just closed a major acquisition last quarter." "How wonderful." The woman's gaze slid to James like a snake sizing up prey. "And this must be the mysterious boyfriend everyone's talking about?" "James?" He didn't wait for Victoria to introduce him. "And what do you do, James?" Here it was again. The test. The assessment. "I'm an analyst at Cross Analytics." The woman's smile widened. "Oh, how convenient." Victoria's hand found James's under the table, her grip tight enough to hurt. "It is convenient." James agreed, his tone pleasant. "I get to work with brilliant people every day, learn from the best in the industry, and occasionally I get to take the CEO out for coffee and pretend I'm not intimidated by her." The woman laughed, but it sounded forced. The conversation moved on, but James could feel the judgment settling over the table like fog. These people had already decided who he was. An opportunist, a social climber, someone who'd attached himself to Victoria for personal gain. It didn't matter that none of it was true. The narrative was more important than the reality. The toasts began. The best friend, the groom's brother, stood and delivered a speech that was equal parts heartfelt and funny. The maid of honor followed with a story about the bride that made everyone laugh. Then Catherine Cross rose from her seat at the head table, champagne glass in hand, and the room went silent. "Good evening, everyone." Catherine's voice carried effortlessly across the ballroom. "For those who don't know me, I'm Catherine Cross, mother of the bride's cousin, Victoria." She paused, letting the room settle. "It's a joy to be here celebrating love and commitment, two things that seem increasingly rare in our modern world." Her eyes found Victoria across the room. "My daughter has always been exceptional, driven, successful. She's built an empire that her father would be proud of. But success in business, as we all know, doesn't always translate to success in life. True fulfillment comes from balance, from knowing when to put down the spreadsheets and pick up the relationships that matter." James felt Victoria go rigid beside him. "So tonight I want to toast not just the beautiful couple before us, but all of us who understand that love requires sacrifice. That commitment means showing up. That you can't build a life with someone if you're never actually present." The room erupted in polite applause. Catherine sat down. The moment passed. But the damage was done. Everyone in the room had heard it. The carefully coded message that Catherine Cross thought her daughter was incapable of the very thing they were celebrating tonight. A man sitting across the table, someone James vaguely recognized from quarterly meetings, leaned forward. That was pointed. His wife elbowed him. "Richard?" But Richard continued, lowering his voice. "I'm just saying. It's no secret the board has concerns about work-life balance at the executive level. Optics matter, especially when you're dating someone who reports to you." Victoria's face was carved from stone. James turned to Richard. "We disclosed the relationship to HR. We're following all appropriate protocols. And Victoria's personal life is none of the board's business as long as she's managing conflicts appropriately." Richard raised his hands. "I'm not attacking, just observing. But you have to admit it's an unusual situation. CEO dating an analyst. People will talk." "Let them talk." Victoria's voice cut through the murmur. "I've been the subject of gossip my entire career. It hasn't stopped me yet." She stood. "Excuse me. I need some air." She walked away before James could respond. He watched her disappear into the crowd, then turned back to find Richard watching him with interest. "She's under a lot of pressure. You know that, right? The board, the shareholders, everyone watching to see if she can actually hold it together." James stood. "And that's exactly why she needs people who support her, not people looking for cracks." He followed Victoria into the hallway outside the ballroom. She was leaning against the wall, eyes closed, breathing controlled. "I'm fine." "You keep saying that." "Because I am." She opened her eyes. "I just needed a moment away from my mother's passive-aggressive toasts and Richard's concerned trolling." James stepped closer. "Your mother doesn't think you can do this, balance work and a relationship. My mother doesn't think I can do anything except work. Victoria's voice was bitter. She spent 5 years waiting for me to fail, waiting for me to prove that taking over the company was a mistake, that I'm not strong enough, not balanced enough, not enough. What do you think? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I think I'm exhausted. I think I've spent so long trying to prove everyone wrong that I forgot what I actually want. She looked at him. What if they're right, James? What if I can't do this? What if trying to have both means I fail at both? Then you fail. James said it simply. And you get back up, and you try again. That's what people do. Not people like me. I don't get to fail. I'm the CEO. I'm supposed to have all the answers. You're human. You're allowed to not know. Victoria laughed, but it sounded broken. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. It's just not easy. The band started playing inside. Couples began moving toward the dance floor. James held out his hand. Dance with me. Victoria blinked. What? Dance with me. Right now. In front of everyone. James, I know you don't want to. I know it feels like performing. But right now I don't care about your mother or Derek or anyone else in this room. I just want to dance with you. So please, dance with me. Victoria looked at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly she took it. They walked onto the dance floor together, and James pulled her close. One hand on her waist, the other holding hers. The music was slow, something classical that James didn't recognize. Around them other couples swayed in practiced rhythm. Victoria was stiff in his arms at first, her body tense, her movements mechanical. But as they moved, as James held her steady and didn't let go, she began to relax. Her head came to rest against his shoulder. Her hand tightened on his. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Do what? Be vulnerable. Let someone in. I've spent so long building walls. I don't know how to take them down. Then don't. Not all at once. Just open a door. Let me stand in the doorway. We'll figure out the rest as we go. She lifted her head to look at him, and James saw something shift in her expression. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something else, something softer, something that looked almost like hope. And then, without thinking, without planning, Victoria leaned up and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, testing, but then James kissed her back, and everything else fell away. The ballroom, the guests, the performance. It all disappeared, and there was only this. The two of them holding on to each other like they were the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. When they finally pulled apart, James could hear the whispers starting, could feel the weight of 100 eyes watching them. But Victoria didn't seem to notice. She was looking at him like he'd just handed her something she'd been searching for her entire life. Thank you. Her voice was barely audible over the music. Stop thanking me. I can't help it. The song ended. Another began. And they kept dancing, lost in their own world, while around them the performance continued. It was Catherine who finally broke the spell. She appeared at the edge of the dance floor, her expression unreadable. She didn't say anything. She just stood there watching her daughter dance with a man she clearly didn't approve of. And for the first time all night, James saw something crack in Catherine's perfect facade. Surprise, confusion, and beneath it all, something that might have been fear. Fear that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about her daughter all along. Catherine didn't approach them. She simply turned and walked away, disappearing back into the crowd with the kind of controlled grace that suggested nothing could shake her. But James had seen it, that flicker of uncertainty, the crack in the armor, and from the way Victoria's grip on his hand tightened, she'd seen it too. The song faded into another, but they didn't keep dancing. Victoria pulled away slightly, her eyes scanning the room like she was suddenly aware of how exposed they were. How many people had witnessed that kiss? How many conversations would start the moment they left the dance floor? I need to leave. Her voice was quiet but urgent. I can't stay here anymore. Okay? Just like that. You want to go? We'll go. James kept his voice steady. That's how this works. Victoria's eyes filled with something close to gratitude. She took his hand and together they walked toward the exit. Not running, not hiding, just leaving with the kind of quiet dignity that said they'd made their choice and didn't owe anyone an explanation. They collected their coats from the check room. The young woman behind the counter tried not to stare, but James caught the quick glance at Victoria's smudged makeup, the way her hair had come loose from its careful style. Outside, the snow had stopped. The city lay under a blanket of white, pristine and still. The valet brought the Mercedes around and they climbed into the back seat, wet and cold and exhausted. The driver pulled away from the hotel, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. James watched the city slide past the window, the lights blurred by snow, the streets empty and quiet. Beside him, Victoria sat perfectly still, staring at her hands. "Are you okay?" James asked finally. Victoria let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "I don't know. Ask me tomorrow. Ask me next week." She paused, her voice dropping lower. "There's something I didn't tell you. About Monday." James turned to face her fully. "The board scheduled an emergency session, 9 a.m., to discuss my relationship disclosure and whether it constitutes grounds for leadership review." Victoria's fingers twisted together. "Richard Blackwood pushed for it. He's been looking for an excuse to force me out for months, and now I've handed him one." "What happens at this meeting?" "They vote, whether I stay as CEO or transition to an advisory role, whether my personal life has compromised my ability to lead." Her voice cracked slightly. "I could lose everything Monday morning. And the worst part is, I don't know if I even care anymore. I'm so tired of fighting." James took her hand. "Then don't fight alone." Victoria looked at him confused. "Come with me, to the meeting." Her eyes widened. "James, you can't. It's a closed board session." "Then I'll wait outside. I'll be there when you walk out. Win or lose, you won't face it alone." He squeezed her fingers. "That's the deal we made, remember? We don't run." Victoria stared at him for a long moment, then she nodded once, sharp and final. The driver turned onto Commonwealth Avenue. The Mercedes slowed in front of Victoria's building, all ornate stonework and tall windows glowing with warm light. They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened into her penthouse, Victoria kicked off her heels and walked straight to the windows, staring out at the city below. James came up beside her. "I need to tell you something about my father." Victoria's voice was barely audible. "The real story, not the sanitized version everyone got." She didn't look at him. He didn't just make bad business decisions, he took shortcuts, cut corners on safety protocols to save money. And when one of his projects collapsed, 3 workers died. The lawsuits buried him. The guilt destroyed him. Her breath fogged the glass. "I found him in his office, the same office I work in now. There was a note. It said he was sorry, that he'd built something rotten and he couldn't bear to watch it fall." James felt his chest tighten. "I was 30 years old, and I had a choice. Let the company die with him or save it. So I saved it. I fired everyone he'd hired. I implemented protocols so strict people called me paranoid. I worked 18-hour days for 5 years straight to prove that cross-analytics stood for something other than my father's mistakes." She turned to face him. "But the board knows. They all know. And they're waiting for me to fail the same way he did, to prove that his daughter is just as broken, just as rotten underneath the polish." "You're not your father." "How can you be sure?" Victoria's voice broke. "What if they're right? What if I can't do this, balance the company and a relationship without one destroying the other?" James stepped closer. "Then you'll fail, and you'll get back up, and you'll try again. That's what people do." "Not people like me. I don't get to fail. You're human. You're allowed to not know." Victoria laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. It's just not easy." She walked to the couch and sat down suddenly, looking smaller, more vulnerable. James sat beside her. "I should sleep." Victoria rubbed her eyes. "But I can't. My brain won't turn off." "When's the last time you actually tried?" I don't remember. James stood and held out his hand. Come on. You're going to bed. Victoria looked up at him. Are you telling me what to do in my own apartment? Yes, someone needs to. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. The bedroom was as minimalist as the rest of the space. White linens, a single nightstand, nothing personal. Victoria climbed into bed, still wearing her sweats, and pulled the covers up. James sat on the edge of the mattress. Stay. Her voice was quiet. Please, just until I fall asleep. Okay. And tell me something real, something you've never told anyone. James thought about all the things he carried, all the truths buried so deep he'd forgotten they existed. The night Anna died, we had a fight. Nothing major, just one of those stupid arguments about dishes. She left angry, and the last thing I said to her was that she was being ridiculous. His voice caught. She died thinking I was frustrated with her, that I didn't appreciate her, and I can't forgive myself for that, for wasting our last conversation on something that didn't matter. Victoria's hand found his. She knew you loved her. How can you be sure? Because love isn't about the last conversation. It's about all the ones that came before. Victoria's thumb traced circles on his palm. And I'm willing to bet that in the thousands of conversations you had with Anna, she knew exactly how you felt. One argument doesn't erase that. James felt something break open in his chest. 3 years of holding himself together. 3 years of being strong for Lily. 3 years of not letting anyone see him grieve. Thank you. Victoria's eyes were already closing. What about you? What's the thing you've never told anyone? She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, sometimes when I look at couples, I don't feel envy. I feel nothing, like I'm watching through glass. And it terrifies me because I don't know if it's armor or if there's something actually broken inside me that can't feel the way normal people feel. Her breathing was slowing. Derek said I was incapable of love. What if he was right? You're feeling right now. James squeezed her hand. You're scared. You're vulnerable. You're trusting me with things you don't trust anyone else with. That's love, Victoria. It doesn't have to look the way movies say it should. But she was already asleep, her hand still holding his, her face finally relaxed. James sat there in the dark for a long time watching her breathe. Then he carefully extracted his hand and walked back to the living room. He stretched out on the couch, exhaustion pulling at him, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept circling back to Victoria's words. The board meeting. The vote. The very real possibility that she could lose everything. The apartment was silent, except for the distant sound of the city below. James must have dozed off eventually because when he opened his eyes again, pale light was filtering through the windows. His phone said 5:47 a.m. He sat up, neck protesting the angle he'd slept in. The apartment was still quiet. Too quiet. James stood and walked down the hallway. Victoria's bedroom door was open. The bed was empty, made with military precision like she'd never slept there at all. He found her in a small office he hadn't noticed the night before. She was sitting at a desk, still in her sweats, staring at a blank piece of paper. Not typing, not working, just staring. Victoria. She didn't startle, didn't turn around. I can't stop thinking about her. Who? Anna. James stepped into the room. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. You loved her. Really loved her. The kind of love that doesn't die just because the person does, and now you're here with me. And I keep thinking about what she would say, if she'd approve, if she'd think I was good enough for you. She finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were red. And I know it's crazy. I know I have no right to think about this. But I can't sleep because all I can think about is that somewhere, somehow I need to tell her that I'll try to be worth what she left behind. James's throat tightened. Victoria, I wrote something. She gestured to the paper. I don't know why. I don't know what I thought it would accomplish, but I needed to say it, even if she can't hear it. James walked over, The paper was covered in Victoria's precise handwriting. Dear Anna, I don't know if you'd approve of me. I'm not soft like you probably were. I work too much. I'm not good with kids. I don't know how to make a house feel like a home. But I promise I'll try to make him laugh. I'll remind him to come home before the office swallows him whole. I'll tell Lily stories about him that he's too modest to tell himself. I'll teach her that being strong doesn't mean being alone. And I'll never ask him to forget you. I'll never try to erase you or compete with you. Because the man who remembers you, who still carries you with him after 3 years, who tears up when he talks about dishes and lunch money, that man is the one I'm falling in love with. You built something beautiful. I'm just trying not to break it. I hope that's enough. Victoria James read it twice, then a third time, and something inside him that had been locked tight for 3 years finally gave way. He sank into the chair beside the desk and cried. Not quiet tears, not controlled grief, but the kind of crying that comes from somewhere so deep you forget it's there, the kind that breaks you open and won't stop until everything inside has spilled out. Victoria knelt beside him. She didn't say anything, didn't try to fix it or stop it. She just put her arms around him and held on while he fell apart. When the tears finally stopped, James felt hollowed out, empty, but also lighter, like he'd been carrying a weight so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. I'm sorry. His voice was raw. Don't be. I don't know why Because you needed to. Victoria pulled back to look at him. And because maybe that letter was for both of us. Maybe we both needed permission to move forward. James wiped his eyes. Can I keep it? It's yours. She stood and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over Boston, turning the snow-covered city pink and gold. I'm terrified of Monday. Victoria said it quietly. Not of losing the company. I'm terrified that if I lose, I'll realize I never wanted it in the first place, that I spent 5 years fighting for something that was never mine. That was always my father's ghost. What do you want? Victoria was quiet for a long time. I want to build something that's mine. Not my father's legacy, not my mother's expectations, mine. She turned to face him. And I want you in it, however that looks. Then we'll build it together. James stood and crossed to her. Win or lose on Monday, we'll figure out what comes next. Together. Victoria nodded. Then she kissed him. Soft and slow and full of something that felt like hope. When they pulled apart, the sun was fully up. Sunday morning, 27 hours until the board meeting. I should make coffee. Victoria's voice was steadier now. And you should probably call your mother. Let her know you're alive. James smiled. And that I'm bringing someone home to meet Lily. Victoria froze. What? Not now, not today, but soon. He took her hand. If we're doing this, really doing this, then she needs to know you. And you need to know her. Because she's part of the package. Non-negotiable. I don't know how to talk to children. She's 8. She'll do most of the talking. Victoria laughed. It sounded almost natural. Okay, soon. They moved to the kitchen. Victoria made coffee while James used her phone to call his mother. The conversation was brief. Yes, he was fine. Yes, he'd explain everything later. Yes, he'd be home by 10 to pick up Lily. When he hung up, Victoria was staring at her own phone. What's wrong? Email from Richard Blackwood, sent at 6 a.m. She showed him the screen. Victoria, I trust you'll come to tomorrow's meeting prepared to discuss succession planning. The board has a responsibility to ensure leadership stability, particularly in light of recent developments. Let's make this as smooth as possible. R.B. James felt anger spike hot in his chest. He's already decided. He decided months ago. This is just the excuse he needed. Victoria set down the phone. I should spend today preparing, building a defense, anticipating every angle of attack. Or I could spend today with you and Lily and stop fighting battles that might not matter. James poured 2 mugs of coffee, handed her one. What would Anna do? The question surprised her. What, if she were in your position, what would she do? Victoria thought about it. I didn't know her, but based on what you've told me, I think she'd choose the people, not the fight. Then do that. They drank their coffee in comfortable silence, sunlight streaming through the windows, the city waking up below them. At 9:30, James kissed Victoria goodbye and caught a cab to Brookline. His mother's house looked exactly the same as it always did. Warm, welcoming, safe. James walked up the path and knocked. His mother opened the door, took one look at his face, and pulled him into a hug. "You look different." "Different how?" "Lighter." She stepped back to study him. "Like you've been carrying something heavy and you finally put it down." Lily appeared in the hallway, already dressed, backpack ready. "Daddy!" She ran to him, and James caught her lifting her up, even though she was getting too big for it. "I missed you, kiddo." "I missed you too." Lily pulled back to look at his face. "Grandma says you had an important night." "I did." "Was it good important or bad important?" James set her down. "Good, really good." His mother gestured to the kitchen. "Coffee, I want to hear everything." They sat at the kitchen table while Lily went to gather her things. James told his mother about the wedding, about Catherine and Derek and the kiss on the dance floor, about Victoria's letter to Anna. His mother listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You're in love with her?" It wasn't a question. "I think I might be." "And she's in love with you?" "I don't know. Maybe. She's scared. I'm scared. But we're trying." His mother reached across the table and took his hand. "Anna would be happy for you. You know that, right?" James felt his throat tighten. "I hope so." "I know so." She squeezed his fingers. "She told me once near the end that her biggest fear wasn't dying. It was that you'd stop living, that you'd turn into a ghost and forget how to be human." Tears blurred James's vision. "She said that she made me promise to kick your ass if you did. Her exact words." His mother smiled. "So I'm telling you now, whatever happens with Victoria, whatever happens Monday, don't go back to being a ghost. You're alive again. Stay that way." Lily bounded back into the kitchen, backpack on rabbit tucked under one arm. "Ready." They said goodbye to his mother and drove back to Alston. James's apartment felt smaller after Victoria's penthouse, cluttered with 3 years of accumulated life, toys on the floor, dishes in the sink, photos of Anna on every surface. Lily immediately started building a fort with couch cushions. James watched her work, feeling the familiar pull of single parenthood, the constant low-grade anxiety of wondering if he was doing enough, being enough. His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. "How's Lily building a fort?" "Standard Sunday." A pause. "Then I've been thinking. About tomorrow. About everything. And I want you there. Not outside. In the room. With me." James stared at the screen. "Victoria, that's a closed board meeting. I can't." "You're my partner. My disclosure. They need to see you. See us. See that this isn't some scandal or distraction. It's real." "Are you sure?" "No. But I'm doing it anyway." James smiled. "Okay. What time?" "8:45. We'll go in together. I'll be there." Lily called from the living room. "Daddy, come help." James pocketed his phone and went to help his daughter build something out of nothing. The way they'd been doing for 3 years. The way they'd keep doing no matter what Monday brought. That night, after Lily was asleep, James sat on the edge of her bed and watched her breathe, her face peaceful in the dim light from the hallway. She'd asked him at dinner, casual as anything, when she'd get to meet his friend from the wedding. "Soon," he'd told her. "Really soon." "Is she nice?" "She's learning to be." Lily had thought about that. "Grandma says Mommy was nice to everyone, even people who were mean to her." "That's true." "Are you going to marry her?" "Your friend." James had nearly choked on his pasta. "Lily, it's way too early for that. But maybe someday, maybe, if we're lucky, if we don't mess it up." Lily had nodded satisfied and gone back to eating. Now, watching her sleep, James thought about what came next. About the board meeting. About bringing Victoria into this small, chaotic apartment. About trying to merge two completely different worlds into something that made sense. It felt impossible. But then again, 24 hours ago, everything had felt impossible. His phone buzzed. Another text from Victoria. I can't sleep. Thinking about tomorrow. Me too. What if I lose James? Thought about how to answer that. Then he called her instead. She picked up on the first ring. Hi. Hi. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. I didn't mean to bother you. You're not bothering me. Talk to me. What are you thinking? Victoria was quiet for a moment. I'm thinking that for 5 years I've defined myself by that company, and tomorrow I might lose it. And the terrifying part isn't losing. It's realizing I don't know who I am without it. You're Victoria. That doesn't change. But what does that mean? Who is Victoria Cross without Cross Analytics? Without the title and the office and the quarterly earnings, I don't know how to be just a person, James. I only know how to be a CEO. James looked at the photos of Anna scattered around his apartment. You want to know what I think? Always. I think you've been Victoria Cross your whole life. The CEO part is just a job, and jobs change. But you, the woman who writes letters to people she's never met, who stays up all night worrying about being good enough, who's terrified of children but willing to try anyway. That's who you are, and that person is worth knowing, with or without the company. Victoria's breath hitched. You really believe that? I really do. I'm still scared. Good. That means it matters. They talked for another hour. About nothing and everything. About Lily's fort and Victoria's impossible coffee machine and the weird quiet of Boston on a Sunday night. When they finally hung up, it was nearly midnight. James went to bed and for the first time in 3 years dreamed about the future instead of the past. Monday morning came with the kind of cold that hurt to breathe. James woke at 6, showered, put on his best suit. Not the borrowed one from the wedding, his own, slightly rumpled, slightly too old, but his. He dropped Lily at school early, told her he had an important meeting. Is it about your friend? Lily had asked. Sort of. Tell her I say hi, and that I'm good at building, in case she needs help. James had smiled. I'll tell her. He took the train to downtown, walked to Cross Analytics through streets still covered in snow. The building looked different in daylight, less imposing, just glass and steel and people trying to get by. Billy was at his desk reading his paperback. Mitchell, big day. How'd you know? Billy tapped his temple. Been doing this 30 years. I know when something's about to change. You ready? No. Good. Means you care. Billy leaned back in his chair. Let me tell you something. I met my wife when we were both too young to know better. Everyone said we were wrong for each other. Wrong timing, wrong everything. But we gave it a shot anyway. He smiled. Had 42 years before she passed. Not enough. Never enough. But I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Billy looked at James. Sometimes the right people meet at the wrong time. Sometimes they meet at the right time. Doesn't matter. What matters is whether you're brave enough to try. I'm trying. Then you're already ahead of most folks. Billy gestured to the elevator. Go on, she's waiting. James rode to the 32nd floor. The executive level was already alive with activity. Assistants moving between offices, the low hum of fluorescent lights and ambition. Victoria's office door was open. She was standing by the windows wearing a charcoal suit that looked like armor, her hair pulled back, makeup perfect, every inch the CEO. But when she turned and saw him, her expression softened. You came. I said I would. She crossed the office and took his hands. I'm terrified. Me too. What if we lose? Then we lose, and we figure out what comes next. Victoria nodded, drew a deep breath. The meeting's in 5 minutes. Conference room at the end of the hall. They walked together. Victoria's heels clicking on polished floors, James matching her stride. The conference room was exactly as intimidating as he'd imagined. A massive table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 7 people were already seated. James recognized Richard Blackwood immediately. Mid-60s, expensive suit, the kind of face that had learned to smile without warmth. And at the far end of the table, looking small but composed, was Catherine Cross. Victoria stopped. "Mother, I didn't know you'd be here. I'm still a shareholder. I have a right to attend." Catherine's voice gave nothing away. Richard stood. "Victoria, Mr. Mitchell, please, sit." They sat. Victoria at one end of the table, James beside her. Richard opened a folder. "Let's get started. We're here to discuss Victoria's relationship disclosure and whether it raises concerns about judgment conflicts of interest or the company's reputation." He looked at Victoria. "Would you like to make a statement?" Victoria's hands were folded on the table, perfectly calm, but James could see the tension in her shoulders. "Yes. James Mitchell and I disclosed our relationship to HR as required by company policy. We've followed all protocols. We maintain appropriate professional boundaries at work. And my personal life has no bearing on my ability to lead this company." Richard made a note. "And yet you brought him to a family wedding, made your relationship public in front of board members and shareholders. That demonstrates a certain lack of discretion. It demonstrates that I have a personal life, which I'm entitled to." "Are you?" Richard leaned forward. "Because in the 5 years since you took over, you've positioned yourself as someone wholly dedicated to this company, someone who puts the work above everything else, and now suddenly you're dating an analyst. It raises questions about priorities." "My priorities haven't changed." "Haven't they?" Richard pulled out another document. "Your work hours have decreased 12% in the last 3 weeks. You've declined 2 dinner meetings with clients. You left the office before 7 p.m. 4 times last week." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I'm implementing better work-life balance, as you and the board have suggested for months." "Or you're distracted." Richard's voice was smooth, clinical. "Look, Victoria, no one's questioning your competence, but leadership at this level requires total focus. And right now, it seems your focus is divided." One of the other board members, an older woman James didn't recognize, spoke up. "I think what Richard is trying to say is that we need to know you can handle both the company and a relationship. That one won't compromise the other." "I can handle both." "Can you?" Richard again. "Because your father couldn't. He let personal issues interfere with his judgment, made decisions based on pride instead of sound business principles, and it destroyed him, and nearly destroyed this company." Victoria went very still. "I'm not my father." "Aren't you?" Richard's tone was almost gentle. "You work the same hours, carry the same burden, refuse to delegate, refuse to admit weakness. How long before you break the same way he did?" "That's enough." Catherine's voice cut through the room like a knife. Everyone turned to look at her. Catherine stood. "I've sat here for 10 minutes listening to you assassinate my daughter's character, and I'm done." She walked around the table to stand behind Victoria. "You want to talk about her father, fine. Let's talk about him. Henry Cross was brilliant and flawed and human. He made mistakes, and yes, he couldn't handle the pressure. But Victoria isn't him." Catherine put her hand on Victoria's shoulder. "My daughter spent 5 years fixing everything he broke. She implemented safety protocols he ignored. She fired people he should have fired. She turned this company from a liability into an asset. And she did it while carrying the weight of his legacy and my expectations and everyone in this room waiting for her to fail." Her voice hardened. "And now you want to punish her for finally having a personal life, for finally letting someone in. That's not about company performance. That's about control. And I won't be part of it." Richard's expression didn't change. "Catherine, with respect." "I'm not finished." Catherine looked around the table. "I was wrong about my daughter. I thought she needed to be softer, more balanced, more like me. But I was asking her to be someone she's not. And this weekend I watched her stand in front of her family and her ex-fiancé and all of you." She gestured to the board members. "And she chose honesty over performance. She chose connection over control. That's not weakness. That's strength." Catherine's grip on Victoria's shoulder tightened. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to table this ridiculous motion. You're going to let Victoria do her job. And if you don't, I'll sell my shares to someone who actually values what she's built here. Is that clear?" Silence. Richard looked at the other board members. Something passed between them, some calculation James couldn't read. Finally, Richard closed his folder. "I think we need time to discuss this further, in private. Victoria, Mr. Mitchell, if you'd excuse us." Victoria stood. James followed. They walked out of the conference room and down the hall to Victoria's office. The moment the door closed, Victoria sank into her chair. "That just happened. Your mother just defended you. My mother just threatened the board." Victoria looked up at him dazed. "I don't understand. She's been pushing me to step down for months." "Maybe she changed her mind." They waited. 20 minutes. 30. James paced the office while Victoria stared at her laptop without typing. Finally, her phone rang. Richard Blackwood. Victoria put it on speaker. "We've reached a decision. The board votes to table the leadership review pending your next quarterly earnings report. If the numbers hold, we'll consider the matter closed." Victoria's eyes widened. "That's it. That's it. For now." Richard's voice was clipped. "Don't make me regret this, Victoria." He hung up. Victoria stared at the phone, then at James. Then she started laughing. Not the polite, controlled laugh from the wedding. This was real, messy, relieved. "We won. You won. We won." Victoria stood and crossed to him. "I couldn't have done that without you, without your mother's advice, without knowing you'd be there even if I lost." James pulled her close. "You would have been fine." "No, I would have survived. There's a difference." She kissed him. And this time there was no performance, no fear. Just two people who'd decided to try. When they pulled apart, Victoria glanced at her watch. "It's 10:30. I should work. I have meetings at 11 and 1 and—" "Or," James interrupted, "you could take the rest of the day off." Victoria blinked. "I don't take days off." "Maybe you should start." She thought about it. Really thought about it. Then she smiled. "Okay. What should we do?" "I have an idea. But it involves meeting someone very important to me." Victoria's smile faltered. "James, I'm not ready. I don't know how to talk to—" "You'll figure it out. Just like you figure out everything else." They left the office together, took a cab to Lily's school, waited outside until dismissal. When Lily came out, she saw James and broke into a run. "Daddy?" Then she stopped, looked at Victoria. Victoria knelt down. "Hi, I'm Victoria, your dad's friend," Lily finished. "I know. He talks about you." "He talks about you too." Lily studied her with the intense scrutiny only children can manage. "You're pretty and tall. Are you good at building—" Victoria glanced at James, lost. He just smiled. "I'm not very good, but I'm willing to learn." Lily considered this. Then she held out her hand. "Okay, you can help with my castle, but you have to listen. Daddy never listens." Victoria took her hand. "I'll listen." They went back to James's apartment. Lily immediately dumped her backpack and pulled out her Lego set. "Sit." She pointed to the floor. "We're building a tower." Victoria sat, awkward and uncertain in her expensive suit on James's worn carpet. Lily handed her bricks, explained the structure, corrected her when she put pieces in the wrong place. And slowly Victoria relaxed, started asking questions, made a joke that made Lily giggle. James watched from the kitchen making mac and cheese for dinner and felt something click into place. This was what it could look like. This messy, imperfect blending of worlds. Later after dinner, Lily asked Victoria to read her a bedtime story. Victoria looked panicked. I don't know any children's books. That's okay. Lily handed her a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. This one's easy. They sat on Lily's bed. Victoria read in a voice that started out stiff and formal but gradually softened. By the end, she was doing voices for the different monsters. Lily laughed. You're funny when you try. When the story was over, Lily looked at Victoria seriously. Can I tell you a secret? Okay. Sometimes Daddy cries at night, when he thinks I'm asleep. He doesn't know I hear. Victoria's chest tightened. What do you do when you hear that? I pretend I'm sleeping, so he won't feel bad about being sad. That's very kind of you, Lily shrugged. Grandma says Mommy would want him to be happy. I think so too. She looked at Victoria. Are you going to make him happy? Victoria felt the weight of that question, the impossible responsibility of answering honestly to a child. I'm going to try, really hard. Is that okay? Lily thought about it. Then she smiled. Yeah, that's okay. She hugged Victoria, quick and fierce, then pulled back and climbed under her covers. Good night, V. V. It's short, easier. Lily yawned. You can go now. Daddy does 3 kisses, but you don't have to. You're new. Victoria stood, turned off the light, paused in the doorway. Good night, Lily. She found James in the living room cleaning up Lego bricks. How'd it go? She called me V. James smiled. That's a good sign. Victoria sat on the couch. She told me you cry at night. James stopped moving. She knows. Kids always know. He sat beside her. I thought I was hiding it better than that. You don't have to hide anymore. Not from her. Not from me. Victoria took his hand. This is going to be hard. Blending our lives. Figuring out how to make this work. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to work too late and miss dinners and probably say the wrong thing to Lily more times than I can count. I know. And you're still willing to try. I'm still willing to try. 8 weeks passed. Not overnight transformation. Not fairy tale magic. Just slow, steady building. Like Lily's Lego castles. One piece at a time. Victoria started leaving the office at 6, sometimes 6:30, once or twice even 5:45. James started bringing Lily to Victoria's penthouse on Sundays. They'd make breakfast together, pancakes that usually burned, eggs that sometimes worked. Catherine started joining them. Awkward at first, but gradually warming, learning to be a grandmother to Lily, learning to be a mother to Victoria in a new way. The board meeting came and went. Quarterly earnings exceeded projections. Richard Blackwood submitted his resignation 2 weeks later, cited philosophical differences. Nobody was surprised. On a Saturday morning in early spring, James woke up in Victoria's bed. Sunlight streaming through the windows, the city coming alive below. Victoria was already awake, sitting up against the headboard, watching him. Morning? Morning? He stretched. What time is it? 7:30. Lily's still asleep in the guest room. They'd started doing weekend sleepovers. Lily loved Victoria's penthouse, loved the view, loved that Victoria let her rearrange furniture and hang her artwork on the previously empty walls. The apartment looked different now, lived in, messy in the right ways. I was thinking, Victoria's voice was quiet, careful, about something my mother said, about building something that's mine, not my father's legacy, mine. James propped himself up on one elbow. And I think I want to step down, not immediately, but maybe in a year. Train a successor, transition to board chair, focus on strategy instead of operations. She looked at him. I want time. Time with you. Time with Lily. Time to figure out who Victoria Cross is when she's not working 80-hour weeks. What would you do if you weren't CEO? Victoria smiled. I have no idea. That's the terrifying part. And the exciting part. James pulled her close. We'll figure it out. Together. Together. Later that morning, James made pancakes while Victoria and Lily set the table. They'd fallen into a rhythm, a routine, the kind that felt easy because it was built on honesty instead of performance. As they sat down to eat, Lily looked between them. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." James passed her the syrup. "Are you and V going to get married?" James nearly dropped his fork. Victoria froze. Lily continued, oblivious. "Because Emily at school says when people love each other they get married, and I think you love each other. You make the same face Grandma makes when she looks at pictures of Grandpa." Victoria found her voice first. "What kind of face?" "Happy sad. Like you're remembering something good, but it also hurts a little." James and Victoria looked at each other. "We haven't talked about that yet, kiddo." "But you're thinking about it." "Maybe. Someday. If we're lucky." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Okay. Can I have more pancakes?" After breakfast, while Lily was building a new Lego structure in the living room, James and Victoria stood at the window. "She's not wrong." Victoria said it quietly. "About the face." "No, she's not." "Is it too soon to be thinking about forever?" James thought about Anna, about the letter Victoria had written, about 3 years of being afraid to want anything beyond survival. "I don't think there's a timeline for this. I think you either know or you don't." "And do you know?" He turned to face her. "I know that I want to wake up next to you. I know that I want to build something with you that's ours. I know that Lily lights up when you walk in the room. I know that my mother thinks you're the best thing that's happened to me in years." He paused. "I know that Anna would approve. And I know that's what I needed to know before I could move forward." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. And yes, someday, when we're both ready, when it's the right time." She smiled. "Ask me again in 6 months." "I will." They stood at the window watching the city wake up. Lily's voice drifted from the living room narrating her building process with the serious concentration of an architect. James thought about Billy's words, about right people and right timing, about how sometimes you meet someone at 3 in the morning in a snowstorm and they change everything, about how love doesn't always look the way you expect it to, about how the bravest thing you can do is try. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you." "For what?" "For walking into the storm, for staying when you could have run, for being exactly who you are instead of who you think I need. That's what we agreed to. Remember honesty?" "I remember." From the living room, Lily called out, "V, come look. I built a castle with a bridge." Victoria squeezed James's hand once, then let go. "Coming." She walked toward the living room, toward the life they were building together, toward something neither of them had planned, but both of them chose. James followed. Outside, the last of winter's snow was melting. Spring was coming. The city was changing. And for the first time in 3 years, James felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real.